Hello and welcome to Emergent Soul Conversations, the podcast promoting self-love and awareness with the hopes of developing sisterhood and community. We will be discussing concepts that pull on the hearts of today's woman. I'm your host, Karen Elaine, and I will share my life experiences along with inviting others to sit down with me who inspire me and also have a willingness to share their soul's journey. This podcast will give us meaningful and intimate conversations that'll help us create a life by design and not default. If this is your first time listening in, I thank you. Now on till today's episode. This is my cancer journey. I hope sharing my story of how I overcame cancer and what I went through will help another person who may be challenged and going through the same thing. So how my story began is that, as some of you may or may not know, I've had 4 kids. And as you know, that after you have breastfed your children, your boobs just don't look the same. So I wanted to try to make myself feel better about myself, and I opted to have a breast reduction with reconstruction. I went to a plastic surgeon and I had surgery. I wasn't really satisfied with how my boobs looked after we had the initial surgery and reduction. And I went back to him and I said, hey, they just didn't look right to me, and I wanted to do something different. And I realized that I had not had a mammogram in the last few years. And so I decided before going back in the office to do the second procedure, I wanted to have my mammogram. So just to give you a little background information, I started having mammograms when I was 35. My doctor who I was going to at the time didn't really think it was necessary because he didn't view me as being high risk. But I really pushed the issue in the sense that it was kind of crazy, but I pushed the issue saying, you know what, I got great insurance and I want to have a mammogram. Now, ladies, if you think about this, I must have been crazy because I really didn't know what a mammogram was. I knew what it detected, but I didn't really know much about the procedure. Because had I known what the procedure was, is that they actually take your boob and make it as flat as a pancake and put it between these 2 metal plates and squeeze the life out of your chest. Why would anyone want that willingly and earlier before they needed to have it done? But that was me. But you know what? I laugh about it now, but that foresight of asking for a mammogram actually saved my life because it was a baseline. I told my doctor at the time, I have 2 aunts on my mother's side who have breast cancer and 1 on my dad's side. So although my mother nor my sister had breast cancer, I wanted to have my mammogram. So before going into the second procedure with the plastic surgeon, I went and had my mammogram. And a few days later, after I had the procedure, I got a call from my doctor saying that they wanted my original films to compare to because they thought they saw something. I mentioned to the plastic surgeon at the time, that the radiologist wanted to see my original films, and he also wasn't concerned, saying, once you've had, some type of breast procedure, most radiologists have a difficult time looking at your film, so don't worry about it. So even though I was in a medical profession in sales, since my doctors weren't concerned, I wasn't really concerned either. Looking back 2020, looking back at the situation, that's kind of crazy because, and I say it was crazy, my thought process was crazy because what I know now is that you have to be your own self-advocate, and if something just doesn't feel right or seem right, regardless if your doctor is concerned or not concerned, if you think something's wrong, you keep speaking up for yourself, sis, and you do what needs to be done and push for it because you have to be your own self-advocate. And I say that had I not pushed to have that mammogram starting at 35, regardless if I had good insurance or not, who knows if I would be here today. Because after they compared my films to my first set of films, there definitely was a change in my breast that warranted to have a biopsy. So I was unaware at that time and not very educated on breast cancer, even though I had the family history, and set out to have the biopsy, going to a surgeon that was recommended to me. I had the biopsy, and my follow-up from that procedure was July the 8th, which happens to be my birthday. And I told my doctor, and I said, you know what, doctor, the follow-up from the biopsy is July the 8th. That's the day you're asking me to come back to your office. That happens to be my 39th birthday. If, in fact, I have cancer, do me a favor. Please call me and change my appointment. I don't want to find out that I have cancer on my birthday. So looking back now, the office called and confirmed my appointment. I was working with my manager in pharmaceuticals that day, and that morning my husband was like, do you need me to go with you? And I was like, no, I'm good. I was confident that I didn't have cancer, and I was confident that everything was fine because my doctor made a commitment to me that if in fact I had cancer, he would change the appointment. And since they didn't, hey, I was confident I didn't have cancer. So I worked that day, went into the office that afternoon, sat there. He opened my file. I remember he stood in front of me, his back to me, was looking at the notes, and then turned around and looked at me, and he's like, you have cancer. The only thing I could think of, and I was in shock, but the only thing I could think of was like, I should punch you in your face. And I didn't laugh. I mean, I didn't say it out loud, but I remember saying that because I was like, I have birthday. It was my birthday. And we made a commitment. At least I thought we made a commitment that if I did in fact have cancer, you would change the appointment. And I surely wouldn't have wanted to be in that appointment by myself, alone, with no support system in place to help me deal with and manage the idea that there was something wrong in my body and I had to make a decision on what I should do. I remember leaving that appointment. My husband at the time was on the West Coast working with his reps. And I remember sitting in my car just crying because I knew I still had to go home. I called my ex and I was like, my husband, saying, hey, I have cancer. He's like, oh, I'm 4 hours away. I'm en route. My mom was working in another state. And all I could think of was that my kids were at home waiting to sing me happy birthday with cake, ice cream, balloons, and presents because that's how we celebrated birthdays. I remember going home and I can look back at the pictures now and I look back at my face and my expression that they took that day, and no one knew except my husband knew and I knew that I'm sitting there with the idea of having cancer and I'm not even present in the moment. When I look back at the pictures of the expressions in my face, my eyes were dead. My expression was lifeless and I was void. And I'm not surprised because the only thing that I could think of was I had cancer. And those were words that I never thought that someone would be telling me. I remember going in and doing the medical review with the doctors and the team and coming up with a plan and deciding that I was going to have a double mastectomy. And I realized and I only had cancer on the left side, but I opted to remove both of my breasts because I didn't want to have to deal with the idea of having to possibly deal with a reoccurrence of cancer, the cancer coming back. And I remember to myself saying, when we go through the review, we decided we would do the double mastectomy. And I remember them telling me that they wanted me to have radiation and chemotherapy, and I declined. And I declined not because I had the idea that chemo and radiation would kill and destroy every cell of my body, and I didn't want that for myself, and I was confident that by catching the cancer early and having this procedure, I would be okay. But I opted not to do it because, if you can believe this, ladies, and those listening, I decided not to do it because I said to I don't have time. I literally can remember saying, I don't have the time to go in and have chemo treatments and radiology treatments for 6 weeks. I actually said I did not have the time. Why didn't I have the time? Because I worked and I had 3 kids that I had to take care of. And the reason I bring this up and why I say it's important, because during that time frame in my life, I thought so little of my own self-worth and value that I didn't think I was worthy enough to take the time that I needed to heal, to do what was right for my body. Now I'm grateful and I acknowledge that I was blessed, because here I stand 12 years after the fact with no cancer, no reoccurrence, from not being on medication, from not receiving chemo or radiation, but just from the surgery itself, that it worked for me. But there's others that it does not work for. And I say that my cancer diagnosis saved my life because at 39, I was lost. I was grieving. I had no clue of whom I was, and it wasn't until I turned 40, my sister-in-law told me, it was like a light bulb clicked, and we were having a discussion about something. I don't even remember what it was, but she said, Karen, you can say no. And I looked at her and said, I can say no? And at 40, I learned how to say no. Someone says, do you want to do X, Y, Z, or can you do X, Y, Z? No, I can't do it. What do you mean you can't do it? My answer is no. And if you didn't know, no can be a complete sentence. And I got comfortable saying no. I got comfortable saying no, and that's when my journey began. My emergent soul journey began at that time of finding out what Karen was made of and who she was. I didn't know at that time who I was, but I knew that I didn't like who I had become. I didn't like myself. I was overweight. I was depressed. I was frustrated. I was angry and anxious at myself, thinking I was mad and upset at other people. But if you look to the core of it, I was mad at myself. I didn't like the person that I had become. And I began to go on a soul-searching journey of uncovering who I was and recovering the voice that I had lost. And I stopped operating from fear. It took me a while to get comfortable with myself and comfortable to be able to make changes and stop staying in toxic relationships and toxic friendships and appreciating the person that I had come. And I was on that journey for many years, and journeys don't end. And even today, I still am on that journey of finding self-acceptance and love for myself. Now, Louise Hayes, in her book, You Can Heal Yourself, says that breast cancer of the left breast is linked to unresolved grief. And if I look back at that time now, and I tell people that my emergent soul journey began with the passing of my son Kenneth, and I believe that he put this in my heart to go forth and spread this message of emergent being, of being an emergent soul. And emergent is defined as the process of coming into being, and soul gives life to the body. And it was the recovering of my life, my life force, my being that I had lost. But in truth, I was carrying grief from years and years before, trauma that was unresolved, and it all culminated into unresolved grief, grieving for my child. And on that journey, and I'm still on that journey of becoming an emergent soul, that process of coming into being and acknowledge who I really am, and understanding that I had been searching for acceptance and searching for love and acknowledgement from other people because I didn't know who I was at my own core. And it wasn't until recently that I can actually say that I love myself. I appreciate the person that I am coming and becoming. And I don't need to look for confirmation, acknowledgement from others. But everything that I was searching for outside of myself had to and has to become and start with myself. And the reason I say that is if I don't know who I am and I don't know what I stand for and what I like, how can I expect other people to give it to me or be that for me? I'm sure a lot of us have seen the movie Jerry Maguire. In that movie, he stands and professes his love and says, "You complete me." And you know what? I hate that line because it's a lie. We're not broken. We're not broken individuals. We're not pieces. So to say that someone completes you means that you're not whole by yourself. And on my journey of coming back to myself, I have acknowledged and I realized that I'm not broken. And I'm not looking for someone to complete me, but rather complement me. I can stand here looking at myself, acknowledging that I have love for myself. I acknowledge that I am perfectly imperfect. I appreciate my body, my heart, and I acknowledge that I have to stand in the gap for myself and first say, Karen, girl, you got it. There is no right and wrong in who you are. Karen, I accept you for who you are. Karen, I love you. And I have to give all of that to myself and acknowledge that I'm receiving it from myself, that I don't have to get it from someone else. We all look for that and want that, but it's so much different when you can give it to yourself first. There were a lot of people on my journey who helped me find and uncover who I am. And if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't have started on my journey. So I'm encouraging you, sister. You're not broken. You're not shattered. You might be going through something, but what happens to you does not define who you are. And you can always peel away the layers and stand in your new creation and become the person that you've always inspired and wanted to be. Life is a journey and not a destination. And I encourage you to take time out for yourself to uncover who you are and whose you are, and appreciate that person. My cancer journey showed me that I did not care enough about myself to put myself first. I didn't value myself to stand up for myself. I kid you not, I had a double mastectomy, and the first day post-surgery, post-week back home, I got a call from my employer who said the company was having layoffs. And if I was not back to work on a certain day and time, I might not have a job. And I remember laying in that bed saying, I can't drive, I can't lift my hands. There's little that I can do at this point in time because I felt I had like bricks in my chest, and you're calling me, telling me that if I'm not back to work by a certain day and time that I might not have a job. I'm blessed to have my life at this point in time. So little by little did I start understanding and saying, if I don't value myself, and I didn't at the time, who was going to value me? So on July the 8th, I celebrate 2 birthdays. The birthday of my being born and coming into this world, and my birthday of hearing the words that, Karen, you have cancer. And my uncovering that I had to make a decision to find out who I am, what I was made of. And because I didn't like it, I had the ability to change it. So, sister, there's more to come. You're not finished yet. It's up to you to determine what you are going to achieve in life and how you're going to show up. What I do know is that life is too short just to merely exist in life. Life is too short not to live completely. The time is now to take off your mask, remove your mask, and find your voice and speak your truth until your voice shakes. To stand up and walk authentically in your truth. To love yourself and value yourself and show each and individual person that, hey, I'm here. I take up space and I will take up space, and I'm acknowledging my presence. To not dim your light. To stand tall and shine. What happens to you, sister, does not define who you are. It's time to live your life abundantly and be an emergent soul. Emergent, the process of coming into being, and soul that gives life to your body. The time is now to live your life abundantly, to live, to be free, to enjoy. There's more stories that I'm going to share with you regarding being an emergent soul and how I've been able to overcome the challenges in my life that they could have broken me, I could have allowed them to define me, but I chose not to. And my choice is to share my stories with you to know that you're not alone. And there's someone here who cares enough about you to encourage you to care about yourself. And it's time to make a difference. So, sister, it's time to live without judgment and to self-love and appreciate. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Emergent Soul Conversations. Join me next time to gain more insights on how to live a life by design and not default. If this was your first time tuning into the show, please make sure and hit the subscribe button below and follow me on Instagram at Emergent Soul. Remember, what happens to you does not define you. Your emergent soul.